Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Well, legally speaking, tampering is defined as, and you ready for this, MJ? When a person having no right to do so, nor any reasonable ground to believe that they have such right, interferes with another person with intent to cause substantial inconvenience to that person or to a third person or party. In other words, in sports, it means you're talking to a player under contract with another team. And of course, it seems like there's been a lot of talking, not just today, but over the last several days and maybe even weeks, considering all the noise via social media on what has happened here, because the legal tampering is underway. It began at 9 a.m. this morning, Arizona time. And yes, there is a bunch of news here in the NFL.
Well, it's after you had the definition there, it sounds like a dirty word.
It is.
Why don't they just say everything's open for negotiations?
Yes, that would be.
Then you wouldn't have that, because, listen, they were tampering at the combine.
Yeah, that's when the Nick Foles deal reportedly went down or was announced.
Hey, everyone's doing it, so obviously the league's aware of it, but they make it cute for the first 48 hours where, I find it interesting when it comes to the national guys because, a few years ago, I think when they had this new rule, you had to wait.
Yes.
And now we're seeing agreed to terms. He plans on signing with the Raiders. It looks like he's going to the Eagles. So now we're playing a word association when it comes to reporting. Obviously, those guys get paid big money because they got to break news. But when it first started, we didn't get anything until Wednesday. Now, there were rumors out there, but now you're getting this. He plans on going here. Well, I plan on going there later on tonight.
Nothing, of course, official until Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m., but we will talk all about what has been reported, speculated, and linked around the National Football League, including involving your Arizona Cardinals. And with that, here on this Monday, let's take off, tell you what's ahead on the show here. And up first, the weird position General Manager Steve Keim finds himself in. Darren Urban joins the show to discuss free agency and what direction the Cardinals may go in. We'll tease the newest episode of Cardinals Flight Plan, and of course your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2 to get involved in the show. We'll do that a little bit later on here on this Monday afternoon. But first, the news of the day, and we'll start with that is just breaking within the last 15, 20, 30 minutes, and that is, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, the Cardinals are expected to, there's your word, MJ, plan to sign Terrell Suggs, the longtime Baltimore Raven pass rusher, and of course, longtime Valley resident, Hamilton High School standout, went to Arizona State, excelled at ASU, a first-round draft pick in 2003. And, of course, people are going to make the connections, and rightfully so, because it is fun. But this is, perhaps for many, 16 years too late. But as they say, better late than never.
Listen, at this point in time, I mean, we know that, obviously the Cardinals had a lot of interest. They also needed bodies. And, they decided the night before to talk to the New Orleans Saints. If Jonathan Sullivan was on the board, they were going to trade down. Obviously, he didn't have a great 40 time. The late George Boone had a third-round grade on him. And he had gotten to an issue with at a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. So there were some red flags coming out, but we all watched him at Arizona State. We know how good of a player he was. It's not a surprise. We would have thought he would play in one uniform his entire career. He tore his Achilles 3 years ago. He's had 36 sacks since then. So he's got something left in the tank. Listen, don't at me. Yes, they should have done this 16 years ago. I get it. Get over it. It's Captain Obvious. We all know that. I mean, you look at it, though, they did get Anquan Bolden in that trade, so they did have something to show for. But for the most part, when you look at it, I mean, he's had an outstanding career. He's a motor guy. He's got great personality, so it's only fitting that he started at Arizona State. You covered him in high school with Chandler? Hamilton, okay. And obviously he's a guy that has ties to the Valley, so you can never have enough pass rushers. After Chandler Jones, who was the next guy, 4.5 sacks?
Yeah, that's right.
And who was that?
Yeah.
Ben Semeoa?
Correct.
So you go from, double-digit sack guys the year before, and then you go to 4.5. Now Brooks Reed, Suggs, and you throw in Chandler Jones, and we haven't even talked about what they can do in free agency or the draft. So, again, you can have enough bodies, and I love his passion. He'll be well-liked in that locker room.
The other name early linked to the Cardinals with regard to free agency, according to James Palmer, NFL Network reporter, Cardinals among 5 teams interested in linebacker Brandon Marshall, which, of course, makes sense. Former Denver Bronco, and you got Vance Joseph, the former Broncos head coach, now the Cardinals defensive coordinator. And, of course, we know inside linebacker is a huge need for the Cardinals.
Well, we'll peel the curtains back a little bit. Anytime that the Cardinals make a hire, my guy over here, Greg Grialou, he'll look at every single free agent and try to attach him. I think James Palmer was listening to our podcast last week. So, yeah, he's the NFL Network is standing outside right now thinking, something's going to pop. Nothing will pop until Wednesday, but they are here covering the Redbirds. And we mentioned this last week. It's a natural fit. Now, you still got KJ Wright out there. You got Hicks out there. Mark Barron's out there. So it depends on what you're looking for fit-wise. But there's some still really good inside linebackers out there.
Now, with regards to the Cardinals' own unrestricted free agents, some news on Desean Buchanan. Pat Leonard, the Giants beat writer for the New York Daily News, tweeted the Giants have been in contact with Buchanan. And, of course, let's connect the dots. James Bettcher, Giants defensive coordinator, had a lot of success with Buchanan as inside linebacker, so perhaps a natural fit with the Giants if the Cardinals aren't interested in bringing Buck back.
Yeah, you look at the 13 free agents, I think they're all going to test the waters. Now, there's a couple guys that possibly could be retained maybe in that second wave. John Phillips, a tight end. He's really a good blocking tight end. And then Ode Obushi, he's an offensive guard. Curious to see if they address that. That's something they want to address. Doesn't seem like they're excited about young offensive linemen playing right away. Doesn't mean you can't use the middle rounds to draft one of those guys. So, listen, it makes sense. They moved on from Landon Collins, kind of a similar player. They didn't want to put the franchise tag on him. He stays in the division rival, goes to the Redskins. So it makes sense if they want him to play that hybrid position in that defense. And you also have Kareem Martin out there, and it wouldn't surprise me if maybe they have some interest in Marcus Golden.
Speaking of which, there is interest with Golden, and reports say the Oakland Raiders, the Oakland Raiders, soon to be the Las Vegas Raiders, but Michael Gelkin, beat writer for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, who covers the Raiders, tweeted that the Raiders have shown interest in Golden, and there's a connect the dots with Golden and the Raiders because Brenton Buckner is now the Raiders defensive line coach. He went from Arizona to Tampa Bay and now with the Raiders, so perhaps some familiarity, but now we're seeing names associated elsewhere with regards to the Cardinals' own free agents.
Yeah, this is interesting about the Raiders. We all know that they're waiting to move to Las Vegas, but I don't know how much cash they have. You know what I mean? Like just cash. I mean, I'm sure if they go to their bank or they go to their bonds or maybe gold, they got some money, but they're giving out a ton of free agent money. Trent Brown, they drafted a right tackle or left tackle in the first round last year. He's going to play right tackle. They went out and got Antonio Brown over the weekend. Supposedly they could be in the mix for a guy like Le'Veon Bell, and they're talking 3 years, $50 million guaranteed for him. So I'd be curious to see. But the Raiders, they are obviously gearing up. They got 3 first-round picks unless they move around. They got 2 second-round picks next year in the first round. So the Raiders, we know that the Chiefs right now and the Chargers probably the teams to beat in that division. But I think John Gruden's going to get it figured out. I just wonder how much upfront money they have where they can spend all this, but I think they're gearing up to go to Vegas.
One other note concerning the Cardinals away from free agency, ESPN's Adam Schefter reported this morning that the Cardinals plan to release tight end Jermaine Gresham on Thursday after the new league year begins because of cap reasons, and really this is not a surprise. It's been speculated for a while now. Gresham on the books for $6.25 million in 2019, and he did not have a great year in 2017, or in 2018, I should say. Of course, the asterisk on that is he was coming off a torn Achilles, only had 9 catches, so a down year production-wise. But as we always say here, there was a down year production-wise for the entire offense, and Gresham got caught up in that as well.
Yeah, if you go back, he was coming off back surgery. The Cardinals signed him for $3.5, and I think they had they said, listen, if you come in and play at 3.5, we're going to reward you. They are hoping bigger things from him, but I think when you sign Charles Clay for $1.5 million, could make $2 million, and then you got Ricky Seals-Jones, and we talked about John Phillips. the Cardinals may only keep 3 tight ends on the roster. They could keep 6 or 7 wide receivers in Kingsbury's offense. So, obviously I liked him in the locker room. I think players respected him from his passion and his toughness. Of course, he did have some of those bonehead penalties at certain points in the game, but I think they missed that early in the season along with Marcus Golden. And, hopefully Gresham latches on somewhere else, but he's made a lot of former first-round pick. He's made some good money in his career.
Darrell Daniels as well. He was tendered a contract on Friday in addition to Seals Jones. And, of course, this draft class, as far as tight ends are concerned, considered to be very, very deep. The Cardinals might look at the draft maybe late in the draft, depending on what is available when their name comes up on the board, but that's also a possibility.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Some guys had some impressive 40 times, guys from Iowa and Iowa State, and you look at Irv Smith from Alabama. I just don't think it's a major need. You'll bring 6 to camp and probably only keep 3 on the roster. We're probably not going to see a fullback, but again, if they want to go mass protection or at least have an extra blocker, you got a couple options there with a couple guys you mentioned, but I do think maybe an undrafted free agent or maybe one of those 3 of the 7th-round picks, but I don't see it a priority on Thursday or Friday.
All right, let's go back to the free agency discussion, and we go back to the Combine in Indianapolis. General Manager Steve Keim at that point called free agency, quote, critical for us, unquote. Keim is also in the unique position here of having money to spend, something he's never had as general manager, in the neighborhood of $40 million. Asked about that, Keim was very honest.
Weird. I mean, it's Carson Palmer and Larry and Pat and those guys ate up quite a bit of it for a long time, but we also had success on the field. So it's that sort of that double-edged sword, but this is fun because you get to build now, and all of a sudden you get to build a little bit differently. So it's all new for me. It's exciting. To be able to approach free agency this way is going to be different, and something that we certainly will relish.
Of course, when you have money or when you do get it, it doesn't mean you have to spend it, at least not all in one place. And right now, we are not seeing the Cardinals being as aggressive as some other teams. It's not they're not picking up the phone and calling agents and trying to make moves, but certainly they're not in the market for Quan Alexander, Justin Coleman, Trey Flowers, Landon Collins, just some of the big names who got big dollars reportedly here today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would use they're not aggressive. I think they're just being smart about it. You don't want to go out and spend money like a drunken sailor, okay? And we know that free agency isn't the end all. I think it's a good plug and play. Last year, of all the free agents signed with new teams, only 4 guys made the Pro Bowl. And yes, the Pro Bowl is a little bit overrated. Maybe I should look at the All-Pro teams. Listen, you look at Adam Humphries, 26 years old, probably the best slot receiver in free agency. He just got a huge deal from the Titans. Jamison Crowder got a huge deal from the Jets. They like players, and Mosley and Quan Alexander, they're the top 2. I would put Hicks in there. But you just don't want to overspend. And this because they have $40 million in cap space, give or take here and there. It's a fluid situation. They want to carry some of that money over to next year because at that point you're going to have to re-update DJ Humphries if he pans out. Eventually Buda Baker. So you can start IDing your core moving forward. And next year they'll have $104 million, which tells me they got a lot of free agents. But right now, the 13 free agents they have, curious to see how many they actually retain. Is it 1, 2? It could be just 1 or 2 at most.
Yeah, so right now being smart, and something that Keim mentioned at the Combine, he made it sound like they would be more patient with how they handled free agency this time around.
Really, the hardest part of free agency is having that money and where do you allocate it. To me, it's making sure that you're allocating it towards players who love it, who really, and really at the end of the day, free agency is extremely difficult because we don't have access to the players essentially before we make these decisions. So a lot of times, it can be fool's gold where you go and you put a big number on a player and he has a lot of guaranteed money attached to him and you really don't know him that well. Unless the coach has coached him before at a different place or you have intimate knowledge somehow about him, it can be very difficult. And I think you have to be very patient through the process, not have to jump out there and spend a lot of money day one. If you go back and you look at my history as the general manager, we've probably had our biggest hits later in free agency or even all the way into the summer and prior to training camp.
Key phrase there, very patient through the process, as Darren Urban of azcardinals.com joins us here inside the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. He has put on the Bose QC35 headsets and joins us now to talk a little free agency. And let's piggyback off that because I know it's on your Twitter timeline because it's on MJ's and it's on mine. So far, the Cardinals have not made that quote-unquote splash. Historically, though, they don't really do that immediately. But your take on how, based off what Keim has said, specifically in Indianapolis at the Combine, on how they might utilize all of a sudden this wad of money, if you will, that he's never had before.
Well, I would, first of all, I guess you're going to have to determine what splash is. I mean, if it turns out that the Suggs stuff is true, while it would certainly not be in terms of this long-term signing, I think that's pretty splash-worthy in terms of locally and getting people's attention. I think they're going to be smart about things. Obviously, we've seen that. You could still end up making us. I mean, most of the time when people say splash signings, you're talking about investing a significant amount of money in something. That doesn't mean that's not going to happen. It just hasn't happened in the first, whatever it is, 6-8 hours they've been able to kind of do this. And that's not super surprising because you look at all the deals that have come down today, and they haven't officially come down. Obviously, they won't officially come down until Wednesday, and hopefully nobody gets Frank Gord in this whole process and it falls apart before we get to Wednesday. But I think that they're going to look at what happens. But a lot of these guys today, I mean, how many times we've raised eyebrows at the Nick Foles deal, at the Landon Collins deal, a couple of the other smaller deals, even guys re-signing, everybody's like, oh wow, that's a lot of money for that guy. I think they want to maneuver through that part smartly, but I don't know if that means that they're not going to have anything splashy. We'll kind of see where we are by the end of the week, and I guess ultimately I don't think that's a bad way to look at it. I mean, if it turns out that they get Terrell Suggs and they need another guy off the edge, even if you're using Terrell Suggs mostly on third downs and use Brooks Reed on the first couple downs, I mean that's pretty smart, and it gives you some flexibility. If you decide to use an early pick on an edge rusher, you're going to need him because Terrell Suggs is 37. He's not going to be here long term, and if you decide not to, you've bought yourself some time if you don't want to make that pick on an edge rusher.
Yeah, I would agree, and it just seems like just me guessing out loud, maybe thinking out loud, when you start looking at that first phase of free agency, they made the trade unofficial until Wednesday on Marcus Gilbert. Okay, give up a 6th-round pick. Starter, he's got to stay healthy like a lot of these guys that are available. I would think wide receiver is something they want to address, maybe double up at that position between the draft and free agency. And then I think inside linebacker, I think it's a need right now. Doesn't mean they can't address it in the draft. I just think once we get past this huge first wave of free agency, maybe it will take to the weekend. When we get to that second wave, guys are going to start getting nervous, and they're going to take these one-year deals because they want to get into camp, especially learning a new system. So obviously it's a fluid process, but I would say this, and I say it every year, and I thought they were going to be better last year. Judge the roster in week 1. And we know the roster is going to change during the season, but 99.9 of your roster going into week 1 is the team you're going to see for the upcoming season.
We go through this every year. We go through, and again, it's gotten worse with the legal tampering where all this stuff all the news is going to come out and nothing official can be announced. And it's kind of made this week kind of weird for these first couple of days. But the fan base is always, and it's not just this fan base, it's every team's fan base. They're like, well, why are we doing, what's going on? Why are we not doing anything? Why are we not signing players? And ultimately, one of the big things for me in free agency is there's a reason why every guy is out there, whether it's age or production or the kind of money he wants. And I don't begrudge any of these guys getting the money that they're getting. That's good. And it's good that they can find a team that is willing, the guys that do get the big salaries, it's good that they find teams that want it. But not every team, just like in the draft, where you start grading these players, every team grades these players a little bit differently in the draft. Some teams might see a guy as a high first-round pick. Other ones might see him as a high second-round pick or whatever it is. Free agents are the same thing. And for whatever you're doing schematically and whatever you're doing where you are with your team, it's going to change how the market is. And so I don't have a big problem with how this goes. And we also know that, most of the time, whatever the Cardinals do this week, and I'm using the Cardinals as an example because that's the team we're talking about. Whatever the Cardinals do this week, you know who their most important players are going to be come September? Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, they're the guys that are already here. I mean, I'm not saying the guys that could sign in the next couple weeks aren't going to play important roles, but those aren't going to be most of the time. Those aren't the guys that people are talking about in terms of the engine that makes this team go.
Well, let's not forget, and I remind Cardinal fans this as well. They addressed several needs even before today with the Robert Alford signing, with the reported trade of Marcus Gilbert. They added a tight end. They added a safety going back to the end of last season. So there have been holes that have been filled, just not in free agency. And I understand that you're seeing the Giants spend a lot of money. You're seeing the Lions be very aggressive. And whereas the Cardinals, I get that. But I think this whole process, looking at 2019 for Steve Keim and his department, happened towards the end of last season with Farrell Cooper and DJ Swear Injure.
And it's funny you mentioned it's not happening in free agency, except a lot of the guys you just mentioned was free agency. It's just not this part of free agency. It's not guys whose contracts are expiring on Wednesday. I mean, Robert Alford was a free agent because he got cut, but he was a free agent, and so was Charles Clay, and so was Brooks Reed, and again, it's an ongoing process, and I agree with MJ. You got to see where this roster is, and nobody's making any grand pronouncements right now, but nobody should be. And I know the feedback that I get a lot of times. Fans get upset with me because I'm not willing to broadly say this black and white. This is what's going to go on, or what. I've done this for too long. This is 20 years covering this team. What are you going to know in mid-March? You're not going to know anything. These guys haven't even been on the field with, by the way, a brand new coaching staff, so you don't even know how any of it's going to fit.
Based off what has been done with this Cardinals team, with the roster so far, and the hole still left, do you have a ranking as far as what you want to see get done in free agency? Now, I'm not talking about the draft, but as far as whether it's a veteran or someone in their prime that could really come in and help this team, at what position though? Where I mean, because we know wide receiver is obviously one, and it still would put offensive line in theirs, but forget what the draft is, but just free agency right now.
Well, first of all, I'm going to say that when you say in their prime, if you're a really good player and you're in your prime,
you're not available.
You're not a free agent. If you're in your prime age-wise, there's some issue there that let you get to free agency. Well, I don't know what it would be, and every team might judge you a little bit differently, but there's something there. So
I think some guys like Adam Humphries, 26 years old, I think he's in his prime.
Oh, I'm not saying he's not in his prime.
Right. I'm just saying.
But the Buccaneers don't let him go unless they think, okay, we've got X amount of dollars and we can replace him. And we don't know, that's a coaching staff that we know intimately. And obviously they don't feel like Adam Humphries he's probably, I don't know a lot about Adam Humphries. My guess is he's a typical slot receiver that doesn't have a ton of speed. And we know that Bruce Arians wants to go down the field, and even if you're a slot receiver, he wants you to have some speed. So he says, okay, we don't need you. Now, I'm not saying he can't help almost every other team, but there's an issue why he's on. That's why he's on the market.
Yeah, well, they gave up on Desean Jackson. You would have thought he would be a natural fit. They got Mike Evans. They got a couple good tight ends there. But I just think guys that are drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, like a Rodney Gunter, he'd be my example. So you play out your rookie contract, and if you're a top 3 pick, you're likely going to be with that organization. I agree with Darren. If you're in your prime, they ID use your core. But Gunter is probably going to, it's going to be a handful of teams that are willing to pay him probably $6 to $7, $8 million a year. And he had one good year, but he was not in that top 3 rounds. And so all of a sudden says, we're going to pay him. And I'm sure he's happy to be just on the open market. So I do think teams look at players a little bit different. But Darren's right. A lot of the guys we've discussed already all have some kind of injuries. Pugh came in with injuries. Andre Smith came in with injuries. Gilbert's coming in with some injuries. And the key is, same with Bradford. They got to stay healthy, but there's a reason why these guys are available.
Well, and using your example with Rodney, we'll see what happens with Gunter. I agree that he had the one really standout year, and I don't know if it was because of the way they were scheming him or whatever it was. But again, you've seen him intimately for 2. I will disagree with you from the fact that I don't care if you're a 1st-round pick or a 4th-round pick. If they've seen you for 4 years and they feel like you're good, they'll pay you the money. I shouldn't say they feel you're good. If they feel like you're worth the money, they're going to pay you the money. I don't think the play where you land in terms of draft matters by then. But they have intimate knowledge of you by then.
Well, I could just say though, if you're a 4th or 5th round pick, you can't command the money of a guy that was drafted in the 1st or 2nd round. So the market's a little bit different. I mean, Rodney told me during the season the Cardinals did have some negotiations, but obviously they probably thought the number was too high.
But I'm just pulling names out of a hat right now. But I'm like, you could sit there and if Richard Sherman had hit the open market, he was absolutely going to command that money despite being a 5th round pick. I don't think it doesn't, to me, once you get to, if you get to a certain level as a player, your round doesn't matter. What matters more about, in this case, let's say a Rodney Gunter, is that there was really 1 year you can point to stand out. It wasn't that he was a 4th round pick. It's that he's played 4 years and there's 1 year that you're pointed to. I think that's the biggest thing.
With regard to Gunter and some of the unrestricted free agents on this team, we've already mentioned that Marcus Golden and the Raiders, Desean Buchanan and the Giants, there seems to be some mutual interest according to reports. Who would you like to see back, Darren, with regards to, their production value and then obviously what this new coaching staff we think wants to do? Because honestly, we don't really know and might not know for a while now, but as far as who could be of some help to return and come back in 2019.
Well, first of all, the Cardinals don't have a whole lot of unrestricted guys, what you're thinking anyways. They
priorities.
Don't have
right.
Yeah. I would say, could they use a guy like Gunter? I think they could. Again, I think some of it comes down to how much the market will bear, and that's what happens sometimes. Guys end up leaving. Alex Okafor a couple of years ago, Kareem Martin. Those are guys they wanted here, but they just weren't going to pay that kind of money for what they could get on the open market, and that's business, and both sides understand that. I think for the locker room and everything, it would still be great if Marcus Golden could come back. I think the Suggs news could be kind of a death blow to what happens with Marcus Golden, and we'll see. You guys have already talked about the kind of interest he's already drawing, and then if Suggs comes here, you've only got so many room for outside rush ends. So that's one thing. Buchanan, I think when you're in a situation where they want to make it work with Reddick, we've already heard about Reddick from Vance Joseph a couple of times, so obviously they're planning on trying to use him. He's going to be an inside backer in the 3-4. And then if you go chase a bigger guy so that Reddick can be kind of the speed guy, that puts Buchanan, I'm not sure if he has a role here, so I don't know how that's going to work. And those are really the three guys. I mean, Trey Boston, they need another safety.
Yes, they do. And there's a number of safeties on the market.
The Trey Boston thing is super interesting to me because here's a guy who talked to a few people, but he talked to Kyle Odegaard at the end of the season. Trey wants to get paid. He wanted to get paid last offseason. He thought he deserved it, never got it, came in here, and then he thinks he had a pretty solid year this year, wants to get paid. There's so many veteran safeties on the open market. Could he possibly look to come back here? Can they get him? How's he going to feel if he's not getting paid what he thinks he should get paid, which, looking at the whole scope of safeties, I mean, the safety market has been set super high with Landon Collins now. And, Kenny Vaccaro signed a deal today. There's a couple more off the market. Eric Reed signed a couple weeks ago. So, I mean, there's guys that are going to get paid. It looks like Tyron might get his money somewhere. But I'm like, there's still so many safeties out there. I'll be very curious to know what happens with him and what direction they go in for a third safety.
What's interesting is you start looking at some household names. Jermaine Gresham, Antoine Bethea, Desean Buchanan, You just look at some of the guys, Marcus Golden, Rodney Gunter. But it goes to show you that they're trying to get better. I mean, usually when you have 13 free agents, you retain a couple of them. And again, I think Phillips and Ode Abushi could be on the list. They're not going to be right away unless they take a deal that they're being offered. But for the most part, you're seeing the guard change. I mean, they want to get better at certain positions, and I think we're seeing it right now. And a couple of those were basically either lack of production or salary cap casualties. Bethea, when he signed a 3-year deal, they always do that. I didn't think he's going to be 35 in July. You didn't think he'd be on the roster unless obviously he wanted to take a pay cut.
I'm going to go back to the safety because that's an interesting spot now for the Cardinals because of Antoine Bethea no longer on the roster. Is he a possibility? We've already heard from the coaching staff that Budda Baker, they want to move to safety and not in the slot, but could all of that change depending on how this safety market plays itself out to where the Cardinals are looking to go, hey, we're not going to invest 3-4 years in you at X millions of dollars, but we'll give you a year or two because it makes us better in 2019 and 2020?
Well, for me, I mean, I guess it's going to depend on the player and what direction they want to go. I mean, you figure that they're going to use 5 defensive backs a lot because that's what teams do. And what do you want to do with that fifth? You know your 2 cornerbacks. You got Patrick and you got Alford. You know your 2 safeties. You got Swear Injure and you got Baker. So what's that other? Is that a straight slot cornerback? Are you willing to try and find a hybrid? I think they've given themselves a little bit of elbow room in terms of how they might fill that role. Could it be somebody, MJ and I were talking earlier today, is David Amerson a guy who you want to use as your slot guy? Or do you want to, upgrade? Where's the market fall? I think some of that is going to be determined on who's out there and what the market is. And like you said, somebody who might be willing to take a 1 or 2 year deal. I mean, I'm not going to completely rule out when you're talking about a team with 10 draft picks that you could draft a guy. So, I mean, there's a lot of options for them right now.
I think slot corner is a bigger need right now
than
safety, depth at safety. Because,
I agree.
I mean, they go 65%, and usually that's a veteran guy. We've seen a couple guys signed today, almost $5 or $6 million a year. These slot corners are getting as much as the number 2 receiver. I mean, you look at Robert Alford, maybe $7.5 to $8 million. We're seeing guys get 5 to 6, and usually it's a veteran guy because you're going against a veteran wide receiver in the slot. So I think that's a bigger need right now, considering how much nickel and dime defense they're going to play.
All right, the other news from late last week was Mike Lennon getting released. Now the Cardinals have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, and we'll count Charles Knauf. I mean, he's
on the roster and he's a quarterback, so I would hope you'd count him.
But as far as
we're better off.
Well, you're not going to count him?
No, people forget about him.
But last year at this time we had zero on the quarterbacks.
But regardless,
actually, last year this time we still had a couple of quarterbacks because they weren't free agents yet. So
regardless of who the quarterback is,
yes.
As far as just strictly backup.
See, are you still happy you brought me on here?
Absolutely,
I'm challenging everything.
Because of what Kingsbury wants to do, there have already been names associated that we speculate with regards. And, of course, now because it wasn't so much of a need maybe early last week, but late in the week, Glennon's gone. You need someone to back up. It's Rosen or if it's Kyler Murray.
I would agree. You need somebody to back up. With all due respect to Charles Knauf, I would think you probably
is on the
want
roster though,
and
Darren.
he was active for 1 week last year.
Circumstances.
It will be. I am curious to see where that goes and who they might be willing to bring in. And you've seen some names thrown out there, whether it's a Tyrod Taylor or a Brett Hundley or
Let's
whatever.
Just bring all the local guys back.
And that's the thing. If they draft N'Keal Harry, there's just going to be a party down there in Tempe. ASU is going to be thrilled. I think that I want to see that. Like somebody like Taylor, I still think there's spots in the NFL where he might feel like, hey, if I land here, I could at least challenge for a job. And that's not going to happen here no matter who the quarterback is. So I don't know if that's going to would be his first choice. And I don't know. I feel like we're kind of throwing darts in the dark a little bit when we talk about fit with Cliff Kingsbury, because really we don't know what's going to fit. We don't know what this offense looks like. We kind of guesstimate and we can kind of hear some stuff and we have some ideas, but at the same time, I don't think we really truly know. And I think that's a hindrance right now. We don't know exactly what direction. I mean, clearly they decided Glennon wasn't that guy, but like exactly what might you want to go? Here's a name I'm spitballing here. Nobody has told me this, and I don't think this is going to happen. But what about Josh McCown? Here's a guy who he still can move around a little bit, and he's a coach on the bench, and I talked to him this summer, and I know he still wants to play, and I know I've read some things where the Jets wouldn't mind having him back, but when I talked to him, he was talking about, he wouldn't close the door on anything. That's another thing when you talk about fit. Okay, how much of a fit does it need to be that he plays, and how much of a fit does it need to, you want somebody in here with a young quarterback?
I'd rather have a veteran guy.
Yeah, and I'll go back to something on on the free agent primers that you and Calvisi did talking about the quarterbacks. Backup quarterback. There's a mentality you have to be okay with being a backup. And everyone wants to play and start, but you made a good point about Glennon. He was, it sounds bad, but he was fine with being a backup.
Well, I don't think it sounds bad. I mean,
it just seems. I'm sure he wasn't fine, but he knew his role and was okay with it for that specific point.
I know I mentioned Taylor might want a starting job. Everything I've seen about him says that he handled being essentially demoted for Baker Mayfield wonderfully. And I'm not trying to take anything away from him. But, yeah, I do think there has to be Drew Stanton had to get there a little bit. I mean, it's a different situation because Carson Palmer had all this resume behind him. But Drew had to kind of come to grips with it to a certain point. Not that he wasn't already good with being a backup, but when he came here, he was thinking he was going to be a starter, and he kind of had to recalibrate himself back to being good about that. And so I agree that's something that's important, and that's got to be part of the conversation with whoever you might want to bring in here.
Well, we know they don't want a Statue of Liberty quarterback, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious getting rid of Glennon. Tyrod Taylor, I mean, I think he could be an option for the Miami Dolphins as a starter. Now, are they tanking? Who knows? They're going to move on from Tannehill. So that's, like Darren said, that's an opportunity, and hopefully learn something from Drew Stanton, because Stanton was a wealth of knowledge for Baker Mayfield. Even though he was inactive, according to Baker Mayfield at halftime, he said he would give me all the adjustments and Freddie would do his thing. Brett Hundley, the Cardinals liked him coming out of the draft. Unfortunately, they were able to take him. Local ties, and according to his father, that somebody has made contact, whether it's through the agent or something. So, and to me, he fits the profile. But if Josh McCown's available, I would definitely consider that. And he is available.
So far through free agency, and again, nothing can be official until Wednesday. But Darren, just real quick on some of the reports out there: Trent Brown, 4 years, $66 million. Nick Foles, 4 years, $88 million. Wow. Landon Collins, we talked about, 6 years, $84. Trey Flowers, 5 years at maybe $16 or $17 million per season. Justin Coleman, 4 years, $36 million. A lot of those guys at their respective positions just became the highest paid players in the NFL.
We got to work on the whole thing when you get in those things, because a lot of those ones people have talked about the guaranteed money. And you're still throwing out the funny money stuff, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Because you know better than that. But it is a lot of fun though to toss it out there.
Yeah, but
it's
not real.
It sounds good, though.
It's
but
monopoly
you're right.
money.
It sounds good to who? The agents?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And
they get to the year 3
it.
of that 5 year, and then all of a sudden you don't see year 4 and year 5.
And you'll see 2 days later when everyone starts announcing it that up to $50 million guaranteed. Technically, it's 37, but we know they're not going to cut these guys in the first 3 years of the contract.
Lions
details tell them
throwing out a lot of money to Justin Coleman and Trey
Detroit
Flowers.
Patriots.
Exactly. Yes, and they added Danny Amendola as well.
Well, I mean, and you were talking about it before I got in here about, again, you draw the lines between coaches that know these players because they know their work habits, they know how they can do, and that's what the Lions are doing. They're getting people that Matt Patricia and people that are from the Patriots who now work for the Lions know a little bit, and that's who they want to give the money to.
And maybe that's the going rate for a slot receiver, 4.5 to 5.3. Tavon Austin's out there. You know, he's been injured. He could be great as a guy that can crossing routes, jet sweeps, bubble screens. So maybe that's the going rate. Now, if you look on the other side, Humphries and Jamison Crowder, they set the mark for the high level of slot receivers.
And, of course, wide receiver, we know the Cardinals need to fill that here in either free agency or the draft. And, of course, all the free agency, you can follow it along on azcardinals.com/free agent tracker. And, of course, Darren Urban does a great job on azcardinals.com. He and Kyle Odegaard, it is at Cards Chatter, at Kyle_Odegaard. And, of course, free agency will be chronicled on Cardinals Flight Plan. The latest episode, titled Golden Ticket, debuts on Thursday. Here's a sneak peek.
This is the most critical part of the process, in my opinion, is the combine, because it's our first access to these players. Having the first pick in every round, guys, obviously it's going to really kind of put a premium on our team.
I think I'm the best player in this draft.
There's a checks and balances system put in place. We'll make sure at the end of the day when it's Cardinal grade put on them, it's the right one.
Is it all just smoke, or is there actually something to it?
There's 1,000 different ways you can go with this, and we're still 50 days away.
What should and what will the Cardinals do?
The two hardest things to read are the heart and the mind. You have to find out, does he love it?
I'm big on body language. I'm seeing how guys are responding to all the external pressure.
The guys that relish this moment, you can tell. They know it, and they show it.
Let's just cut to the chase here. Is it a possibility?
I mean,
everything's a possibility right now.
This is the interview room where we get to know the players as people.
I'm meeting with Arizona tonight.
The scout will track down the player, bring him to the door, and I'll bring the player in.
Question for you, Darren. Was that Nick Bosa walking into the room, or was that you about to walk into the room in Indianapolis? Because the edit on that, and I mentioned it on Friday, was absolutely perfect. You want to talk about the ultimate teaser? That right there is a teaser because you have no idea who that player is.
I was long gone from the room by the time that piece of film was. There was more coaches in there than were there when I was still there.
Thursday at 6 p.m., Facebook Watch and YouTube for Cardinals Flight Plan. And, of course, you can catch up on all past episodes on azcardinals.com/flight plan. As we broadcast here on a Monday afternoon from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center and doing so in our Bose QC35s. Darren has agreed to stick around. And right now, it's time to hear from the Bird Gang. Bird Gang sound off using the hashtag CardsCover2. Hashtag CardsCover2 using the number 2 to get involved in the show. And we'll begin with Twitter. And this was something, MJ, I know you were tagged with throughout the day, and we can address it here on the show. But user wanted to know about DJ Swear Injure, and had the Cardinals not claimed him off waivers, do you think they would have been targeting him over the rest of the free agent class amongst safeties?
No, because he was under contract.
All right, then let's put it this way. If Swear Injure is a part of this safety free agent class, how do you think, because of his familiarity with the Cardinals, fit dollar figures? I understand that, but having him out there with so many other names,
I think he wants more than $4.8 million per year.
Yeah, especially after he saw what Lennon Collins got. It'll be interesting to see how DJ is this year because, he's gonna. I think he's gonna feel like he's fairly underpaid at this point. But a lot of safeties are, again, after the numbers that are being thrown out there.
I just wonder how much more money there is going to be out there for safeties.
I think that's fair. I think, to your point, if he was in this class, it would be tough, just like it is for all these safeties that are out there right now because there's just so many of them.
And he mentioned Eric Reed a few weeks ago, 3 years, 21. So you're looking, Tyrann Mathieu reported 9.5 he was offered. So it's somewhere between there. But I think a guy like Trey Boston's probably looking at 2.5. And floated with incentives. I don't think he's going to get 5 or 6. I hope he does for his sake.
On Twitter, a user wants to know if the Cardinals re-sign Marcus Golden or sign another outside linebacker. And according to reports, they are adding Terrell Suggs. And this question was sent in before that news. How does that affect the Cardinals selecting or not selecting Nick Bosa?
I mean, for me, and as I mentioned before, I just feel like he's 37 years old. If I don't think you're passing. If you decide Nick Bosa or Josh Allen or whatever, if you trade down, Montez Sweat, whoever it might be, I feel like if you feel like that guy is your guy, you're not passing on him because of Terrell Suggs. Golden might have been a little bit different of a situation because he's so much younger. But if your guy is Suggs, that's a short-term deal, and you need to think long-term.
Yeah, I mean, you got Brooks Reed here on a short deal. Suggs likely, I don't know, probably a 1-year deal just based on age. Who knows how long he wants to play? Listen, they're going to sign a D lineman, whether it's a D tackle. They already signed an outside linebacker. So, listen, the draft is totally different when you can draft a guy like Bosa, Quentin Williams, or even a guy like Josh Allen. Hopefully you got those guys for the next 10 to 12 years, and those are playmakers. So I wouldn't read too much into it, but ultimately they got to do what's best for them when they have those high picks in each round.
And again, quickly, the whole point of free agency is to plug holes so that when you get to the draft, you can do whatever you want to do.
Very true.
That's the idea. The idea is that you have no real needs in the draft, so you can get the best players. That's what you're trying to get to.
And we talked about this. When you know you may lose a guy in free agency, i.e. Calais Campbell, you start drafting that position prior. Now, unfortunately, it hasn't worked out right now with Kandichi, but you can forecast when you know you're going to lose a player, you already have a guy in place.
Last question from Twitter. Do you think we re-sign any of our own free agents, and if so, who?
Well, I mean, I guess we already kind of talked about it. I think it's very much up in the air right now because we're so – I mean, I shouldn't even say they're going to test it. They are testing it. Since teams can talk to them already, these guys already have an idea of what their market might be. And so I guess the question then is, do they come back to the Cardinals and the Cardinals talk to them because they're going to know what their worth is?
I know Keim and Indianapolis mentioned that he was still hoping to sign 3 or 4 of their own free agents. As it stands right now, the only free agent they did re-sign was Larry Fitzgerald amongst the unrestricted category. They did bring DJ Foster back.
Right.
Not that you're surprised, because the longer you go, the more apt you're going, I want to see what I'm worth. But is there any party that might be a little surprised that 1 or 2 other guys didn't?
No, for the exact reason that you're saying is I think ultimately once you get past the season, when you can't get hurt anymore, then there's a lot of reason just to wait to see what the market is. Now, a team can say, look, once we get to actual free agency, this is our offer to you. Once we start free agency, that offer goes away. Then maybe some choices have to be made. But my guess is that that's not the kind of hardball that's being played in a lot of ways. And I think guys would kind of want to see where they are. And maybe the team wants to let them see where it is because they want them to understand where their market might be.
Well, I think Rodney Gunter is a prime example. If they were just having light conversations and his agent's obviously doing his job, okay, we can get more money. And at that point, and I see agents rip other agents for like Robert Alford and Brooks Reed signing like, why don't you guys wait 2 more weeks? No, they want to find their home. Each guy's different.
Yeah.
Now, some guys want to be red carpet. Those days are over. I mean, they'll bring you in, give you a visit, maybe a steak, and get a physical. But to say that you don't have conversations, you have an idea what that player wants, and usually if they start shopping it, they pull the deal off the table.
That's why I think it's so important to remember that Alford, Reed, and Clay all chose to sign immediately as opposed to wait, because I think that speaks to what they felt was here and the potential here with the Arizona Cardinals. Let's move to Instagram as we continue Bird Gang Sound Off. User wants to know, and again, this is a little bit outdated, but we can adjust to it. Wanted to know the Cardinals potentially trading for Desean Jackson. According to reports, he's on his way to Philadelphia, but at 32 years old, that would be one of those veteran free agents, or veteran wide receivers, I should say, whether you get them via trade or sign them. But at $10 million, which was he was scheduled to make this season, that to me might be a little bit out of Cardinals' price range.
I think it's out of price range just from the standpoint when you start adding in age and production of late and what you're trying to get and where you are as a team. I don't know if that ever really would have made a lot of sense to me. I mean, to me, Philadelphia makes a lot of sense for Desean Jackson, where they are as a team, and he's happy to be there, and he never really wanted to leave Philadelphia in the first place if it wasn't for the whole Chip Kelly thing. So I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't, even if he hadn't been traded yet, I would have thought that doesn't really ring true to me.
Yeah, you're giving Larry, $11 million this year, and he's 36. So I don't see them spending that kind of money. I think you can get 2 receivers for that kind of money. Now, again, more of a slot guy, maybe a Jordan Matthews, who's a big physical receiver, really smart guy in route running and stuff like that. So I would recommend you to draft Desean Jackson on your fantasy team.
Last question from Instagram. How does the Cardinals cap situation compare to the rest of the league? And I'm guessing with regards to how much money they have to spend.
Well, I know the report, the people reporting it this morning before everything started happening, and obviously no cap space has been used up because, again, nothing's been official. But I think they had the Cardinals 10th in the league with the most room. But again, this is why, and I know earlier MJ mentioned guys being cap casualties. Cap casualties makes it sound like you're cutting a guy because you don't have room, and there's very, very few of those people. Every team in the league, including the teams that don't have a lot of cap room, can make any contract work if they want. Cap casualties is a euphemism for we're probably going to get rid of this guy because he's not good enough for what he's getting paid, and we really don't want to have him around, and we can spread this money out otherwise, so we're going to cut him because of his cap number, which is true. But again, it's like Antoine Bethea was still a solid player. If he was making $1 million this year instead of $4.5 million,
and he was 29,
he'd probably still be here, And so I don't think it's so much about them that they don't have room for him. They just decide they want to readjust where they're putting that room for. But the original question, they had a little more than $40 million in cap space, but again, they can do whatever they want if they really want to.
And you can always get more I mean,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you
can play with the numbers all you want to get done what you need done. That's when I say you can do whatever you want. That's my point. My point is there's nothing that should be able to hold you back cap-wise anymore with the way these teams operate.
By the way, this was the legal tampering period. Is there anything going to be left Wednesday at 1 p.m.?
Yeah. There's over 300 free agents.
Just saying, as far as
now, is there going to be exciting news? The vast majority of the stuff that's going to happen Wednesday is stuff that we already heard about today or tomorrow. So the wow factor is not going to be there Wednesday, but there could be some wow factor Thursday and Friday. Once this initial wave happens, it's almost like the opening of free agency now is going to be the second wave of free agency, which is why if you're sitting there a week from tomorrow and you don't have a deal done.
Yep.
Like MJ was saying, you're gonna get a little freaked out, I would think.
You know what's amazing is some of these teams make these offers and they haven't even met the player. Like, I would bring a guy in for a visit.
Well, but you don't have a choice anymore.
I know.
You know how that works.
I know, but I mean, again, they like to be but somebody's offering you money. I'll see you Wednesday. I'll take my physical.
Yeah, sight unseen, and never even visiting the city.
Well, both teams. I mean, the player doesn't want to lose the opportunity, and the teams don't want to lose the opportunity either. I mean, it's how fast this all goes. It's why we're getting a bunch of reports today about deals being done where obviously no one's visited and no one's had physicals, and that's why when we talk about. If we talk about, let's say, a Brandon Marshall, the linebacker for the Broncos, knowing Vance Joseph for 2 years, that's why that kind of stuff is important, because they already have the background. That's why you see all these Patriots going to the Lions, because they already know those guys. They don't have to have the visits because they already know them.
Appreciate Bird Gang sounding off here on this Monday using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2. We'll do it again on Wednesday when all of this stuff can become official at 1 in the afternoon. Speaking of visiting, and just a question for both of you, because I keep track of random things on my calendar. Do you two know where you guys were 7 years ago today?
7 years ago
I'm sorry, 8 years ago today.
So what, 2010?
2011.
2011. Oh, it is 2019, isn't it?
We were all together.
We were?
Yes.
Well, then
for a long day.
Oh, that Peyton Manning?
Exactly. 8 years ago today.
It's funny you say that.
Peyton Manning visits.
You're wrong. I wasn't here.
You weren't here?
No. First of all, didn't he visit in 2012?
It was March 11th. It was 2011.
Okay. I wasn't here because I had to go. I was actually at League Digital meetings.
Oh, okay.
And I had to leave town. So obviously you don't remember me for my good looks because you thought I was there, and I clearly wasn't.
was there, Grialou.
You just assumed
we
I
were
was
sitting
there.
on a golf cart.
We
like
were
8
all
of us.
waiting, and I remember
I would have been there, but I was in Austin, Texas, actually.
And it was, obviously spring training, but Peter King walked up because he was here watching baseball, and there was, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 of us just waiting for any glimpse, and there he showed up about 4 o'clock in the afternoon after 8-9 hours of us waiting.
By the way, I'm going to dial it back. I hate to, because I would never want to embarrass you, Craig.
Go right ahead. We're friends.
But obviously you've already forgotten who I am, whether I was around. It had to be 2012 because you know what was going on in 2011?
Lockout?
Was the lockout. So Peyton Manning wasn't visiting anywhere in 2011. 2011 was the year he missed. 2012 would have been the year he...
And that's the year the Cardinals obtained Kevin Cobb.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look back at that.
Kevin Cobb was 2011.
Yeah,
he was already here.
Right.
Yeah, 2011 they had
Right.
Cobb. They got Cobb. And
That
then
was a lockout
2012, when they had the chance to get Peyton. They were hoping to get
Still
Peyton.
March 11th.
I believe you.
Date
there.
this, and maybe I'm off on my
But
years.
2011 was definitely the lockout.
Still an anniversary. We were all here.
See, I knew I was going to hurt your
except
feelings.
Except for Darren.
And I
He'll
don't wanna
never
hurt
be
your
back
feelings.
here on Cards Cover 2. The first ever guest,
I knew
and
that was
now
gonna
his
happen.
last appearance here on March 11th. Appreciate you, Darren, sitting in here on this Monday at Cards Chatter. And, of course, azcardinals.com for all of your information as free agency. Not quite official, but
what?
Close enough. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Almohandro, Devin Henry, and Jackson Sipes. For Darren, Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you again on Wednesday here on Cards Cover 2. You're never
Don't
asked
hate
back.
me.